What is up, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Welcome to another video and to another work assignment where I have to take this Hobby 50 all the way across the city and into the suburbs. We're doing a home delivery today, and this is my first time actually riding the Hobby, this little 50cc 4-speed mini bike on the open road, or actually on city roads, because this thing is limited to 45 kilometers an hour, and I really wouldn't like to have it on the proper open road. So what are we working with? We're working with a 49cc fuel injected single cylinder engine, normal clutch, and a 4-speed gearbox. So yeah, we have about 2.5 horsepower to work with, and a top speed that's limited to 45 kilometers an hour. Not because this thing is so stupendously powerful that you need to limit the top speed. It's because that's what the law says here. If you want to drive a 50cc on a car license, it has to be limited to below 49 kilometers an hour, and everybody limits them to 45 kilometers an hour. But like I've said in my video review of the Hobby, which you can find linked somewhere up here, this thing is actually a wonderful beginner bike in the sense that it teaches you a lot about riding. And okay, 1 second, I have to get my mirrors adjusted. Neutral, come on. Okay, that's good enough. Also, this is good enough. Good. Kind of stupid of me to not adjust my mirrors before I left, but it is what it is. I'm used to riding them in the yard, not on the open road. And it's gonna be an interesting ride, because having so little horsepower, especially in a city like Bucharest, where let's just see, people don't drive or ride according to the speed limits, we're gonna have our work cut out to try to not get in traffic's way. It's a good thing this little machine is actually comfortable. Like I said in my video review of it, I fit on it just perfectly fine. That was top gear. 4. I was searching for another gear, but it doesn't have another gear. I've always been curious what a 50cc motorcycle would feel through city traffic. I know scooters are okay, but also feel kind of slow. This gearbox really does make you work for it. And that is the whole point why I always say this little machine is a perfect learning tool. Because if you can handle the clutch, which is a very, very touchy clutch on this machine, and you do have to shift a lot of gears, you do learn quite a lot from riding this thing around. If you get used to riding this thing around, you're gonna ride just about any motorcycle absolutely fine. You're gonna be okay on it, because you have to do so much on this. You're constantly changing gear, you're constantly listening to your revs, trying to be in the perfect gear, because this engine doesn't have a lot of power. You need all of its 2.5 horsepower all the bloody time, and you really have to work that gearbox to try to get it to move at a decent pace. No, this ain't actually all that bad. What are we turning? 7.5, 8,000 RPM, doing 46 kilometers an hour. That ain't bad. Cars behind me are actually very, very civilized. I'm gonna have to change lanes because I am going up on the bridge. 47 kilometers an hour. Come on, little Hobby, little 50cc's. You do have a lot of time to enjoy your city riding something like this. There's also a 125cc variant, which is a lot more interesting for me, but I haven't ridden that. We've never sold one, so I haven't seen it in person, haven't been on it. It's still the same frame or thereabouts. The engine is a little bit different. It's not a forward mounted engine, it's like an upward mounted engine like most 125cc motorcycles. But that would be an interesting bike, because you know, the ergos of the hobby are actually really good. You do actually fit on it. A normal sized human being does actually fit on it. You do look very wonky on it because it's so small, but it fits you. It's not uncomfortable. It's not unlikely that you could do long distance trips even on a little 125 variant of the hobby. But I haven't been able to ride it. I've ridden the Honda Monkey, which is another 125cc 12-inch wheels motorcycle, mini motorcycle. Also, I've ridden the Benelli Tornado Naked 125, which is again another 125cc, and those are fine. So the 125cc variant of this thing should be just as fine. But I think this is actually smaller than all of them, even smaller than the Tornado, even smaller than the Monkey or the Grom. This thing is small. Now those aren't big bikes, those are mini bikes as well, but somehow this thing is actually a little bit smaller. And surprisingly, I am keeping up with traffic. Very surprisingly, considering I only have 2.5 horsepower to work with. This might not actually be quite such a bad ride. It's not that I was dreading this ride, but I was like, oh, riding 25 kilometers on a little 2.5 horsepower machine, might be boring, but you know what? The gearbox actually makes it entertaining, because you constantly have to work it and you constantly have to think about the speed, your gear, your RPM. Now we're on an open bit of road, so I'm basically in 4th gear. I'm not wide open throttle because I know we're limited to, we're just about hitting the limiter, so I'm just half throttle and just chugging along, nice and easy, nice and slow, da-da-dee-da-da-da-da. And I don't know if you can see behind me, but the traffic is quietly waiting behind me. We're gonna have to switch lanes here, because we're gonna have to make a left here at the traffic light. But you know, people are civilized. I haven't ridden a 50cc in the city for quite some time now, ever since I got my Donnie, my ST200. But you know what? It's not that bad. Have to be wary of the mirrors because these mirrors are kind of in the way. They are pretty decently big, so let's see, find neutral. Is it neutral? Yeah. This thing has a habit of showing you the green end on the dashboard, but then actually not being in neutral. Come on, little hobby! And that's kind of it. We are gaining speed slowly but surely. But yeah, if this thing, if you want to get off the line quickly, you really have to work the clutch and you really have to work the revs. And somehow, even though it's a 50cc, I think it has a very heavy flywheel, because it doesn't like to rev immediately. You would expect the 50cc to be extremely quick revving, but it's actually very slow revving. I don't know exactly why. I'm guessing a very heavy flywheel, but yeah, you really have to prep. I mean, before you start letting the clutch out, you have to build the revs, then you have to slip the clutch while holding higher revs. And come on, yellow, we're not running a red light. Oh, I remember this from riding 50 cc's. You have to time everything perfectly. Split second decisions, you have to time them perfectly. And if you want to make quick progress through the city, you have to time your shifts, your accelerations, your maneuvers. You have to time them perfectly. And look, this is what I was saying. See how slowly it revs up? So now green is almost here. Get in first, rev it, and then start letting out the clutch while giving it more and more throttle. You can give this thing full throttle because, don't worry, it's not gonna get away from you. But there's a lot to learn from a bike like this. A lot of things to learn from a bike like this. So why buy this instead of a scooter? Well, it's not as practical as a scooter. You have, and I think it's slower than a scooter, especially off the line. It is quite slower than a scooter because you have to change your gears, you have to manage your clutch. A CVT transmission really gets the most out of a little 50cc engine. A manual gearbox doesn't get the most out of a 50cc engine. But the difference between this thing and a little scooter, a little 50cc scooter, is this thing, apart from having like a normal gearbox and teaching you how to use a clutch and a gear shift lever, this thing makes you feel like you are on a motorcycle, because the rider triangle is exactly like a motorcycle, and not a motorcycle for kids, a motorcycle for grown-up people, because like I said, I fit on it just fine. It is, the bike itself is small, but the seat and the handlebars and the spacing between the handlebars and the seat is like on a normal naked bike. So although you might be thinking this is a small little cramped machine, it's just a small little machine. It ain't cramped at all. I'm very comfortable on it. I have a lot of room. I feel like I'm on a motorcycle. The only difference is when I look down, I see that I have this little thing between my legs. And but that's the only difference. So in terms of learning, in terms of it being a tool to learn on, it's a very good tool. This does actually teach you about motorcycling. You feel like you're on a motorcycle. You have to control it as a normal motorcycle. It's exactly what it should be. So you don't get this thing to use it as a tool to go to work, or you can use it to go to work and everything. That ain't no biggie. But a scooter has more storage space. You can put a top case on the back. This thing doesn't have a rack or anything on the back. It's just a small little machine. But in terms of practicality, a scooter has it beaten. It basically eats its lunch. But as a machine to learn riding on, and to learn clutch control and friction zone and controlling your engine revs and feeling like you are on a motorcycle, this thing has, it's better than everything I could think of to learn. Like I've said in my review, if you have like a property or somewhere that is not a normal road, and you give this thing to a little 12-year-old kid and you let him ride it as often as possible, by the time he's 16 and can get his A1 license, he's gonna know how to ride a motorcycle probably better than a lot of veteran riders, because this thing forces you to use the controls of a motorcycle constantly. I'm constantly going from first gear to fourth gear, just trying to keep up with traffic. On a big bike, you basically, in the city at these speeds, you're using 2 gears, first and second. That's it. And if you're really in a hurry, sometimes you don't even have to take it out of first gear. But now what's going on here? Coming through. But But with this thing, you really have to work it. You really have to be on your game, always looking for the revs, always listening to the engine, always feeling the lack of power or the little power that it does have. You have to use all of it constantly, and it's that. Now a 125cc would be a lot more fun in the sense of riding slow bike fast, but this is actually too slow to ride it anything remotely fast. But it makes you work, it makes you constantly work for those little 2.5 horsepower that you need all the time. And then if you learn to ride this thing properly, and then you get on a big bike with ample power, you're gonna know how to use everything, how to use the friction zone, how to get the most out of your engine, or get as much as you need out of your engine. Because sometimes you don't need to get the most out of your engine, you just need to get, I don't know, 10 horsepower from a 50 horsepower engine, because that's all you need at that point. It's a wonderful little machine to learn on. And riding it now through the city, it's not that bad. It is a little bit slow. I would have loved it to be a 125, but if you don't have a motorcycle license and you want to learn on something, you don't want just a two-wheel vehicle as a tool to get to work. You actually want to learn motorcycles and maybe in the future get your license, but you want to practice on something. This thing is more than just practicing. This thing is a proper learning tool. I think everybody should ride one of these, and it's no wonder these things are predominantly used in riding schools. Here, at least here in Bucharest, a lot of riding schools have these things, 50cc normal motorcycles, to give to students when they go out on the road, to teach them a couple of things about riding, because it was just made for this. In my opinion, 50cc is too small. I hate that we have this legislation with 50cc's. Modern 4-stroke fuel-injected 50cc's are too slow. I know the old 2-stroke 50cc's were actually quite fast, and yes, though that was a 2-stroke. But these 50cc's modern emissions compliant 4-stroke engines are slow. They only have 2.5, 3 horsepower. They are slow, and they cannot make any more power because of the emissions, because of the fact they are 4 strokes. They would have been, a 50cc should never be anything else than a 2-stroke. But it is what it is. That's the legislation. And like I've said, we're getting passed by a 50cc scooter. He's going 1 or 2 kilometers an hour faster. This is the slowest race in history. And yet he was looking at it, because it does attract attention. It's a motorcycle, it will attract attention. You know, I thought I would be more of a nuisance to traffic on this little slow machine, but I'm fine for now, and I'm not even on congested roads, but people are passing me nice and civilized, and not even all that fast. I mean, look, granted, I am going at top speed, we are reaching VMAX, but people are nice and civilized. Even the cars behind me maintain a proper distance, and then they pass me on the left side civilized. This is something I tell everybody riding 50cc's. I know you're slow and you're trying to think of ways of getting out of the way, but do not ride on the side of the road. Always maintain the middle of the lane, and let everybody pass you on the left like they normally should. Do not go right next to the curb, because if you leave enough of a gap, cars will try to force their way past you if you leave them enough of a gap. And it's not necessarily a problem. You can fit with this thing on the same lane as a car, but sometimes you're not always checking your mirrors, and especially when you're riding that close to the curve, you're looking very carefully up ahead of you, and cars coming past you very close to you on the same lane are gonna surprise you, because you're not gonna be ready for them, and you might twitch a little bit and pull to the right and hit the curb and have a bad day. So keep the middle of the lane, let the cars pass you however they wish on the left hand side, and just enjoy the ride, enjoy the beautiful day. I think third gear is enough for this. Uh-oh, it's the fuzz. It's the traffic fuzz, or actually the truck fuzz. Checking all the lorries and the trucks and the vans and everything. Hello. How's about that, getting away from a proper motorcycle? Yeah, boy, we're part of the gang. But you're always part of the gang. Doesn't matter your engine size. If your knees are in the breeze, that's alright, man. And currently, my knees are well and truly in the breeze. You know, I'm starting to get used to this gearbox. It does take some time. It is a learning curve, but it ain't that bad. Really? Yeah, what I was saying, yeah. The gearbox is actually nice and slick. Now, when I did leave, and basically my experience riding these things are brand spanking new, and every new motorcycle, the gearbox is very, very tight. You need a couple of kilometers, 50, 60, 70 kilometers on the gearbox to really get it a little bit broken in, so it starts being nice and slick and shifting nicely. And already after 17 kilometers, it's starting to get into its own. The engine is at full operating temperature, the gearbox is at full operating temperature, and it's starting to have a little bit of finesse. That's what's missing with, that's what I always felt was missing with this 50cc hobby. It doesn't have that finesse. Somehow, with just 2 horsepower, somehow everything was very brutal. But now, when everything is up to operating temperature and has a couple of kilometers under its belt, it is starting to have a little bit of finesse, which is nice. Get some cool air. Now this is gonna be interesting. Keep the revs up. Second gear, third gear, and fourth gear as we exit the roundabout. We need all 4 gears to exit a roundabout. And traffic again. But the little hobby fits where no other cars fit. We are getting close to the destination, and that last roundabout, that was the ring road of the city, so we are thoroughly in the suburbs. Welcome to Eastern European suburbia. Pumpkins, because Halloween is coming, because Halloween somehow became an Eastern European tradition, imported from the US. What we do for Halloween, we basically just dress up funny and buy pumpkins. That's about it. I don't know what the other meanings of Halloween are, but that's what we do here. We just imported what we liked, and we like costumes and pumpkins, and that's everything we did. Now the car behind me kind of pushed me but doesn't want to pass. I'm giving it room, so yep, there it goes. Sometimes when there is room and there isn't a curb, I like to move to the side and check my mirrors and let the cars pass. But when you're next to a curb, like I've said, try not to keep close to the curve. It's not that cars don't fit, but they might actually startle you, and when you get startled, that's when you're gonna have a bad day. This is what the hell? Bloody hell. What I was saying, oh yeah. You know what, as we're getting close to our destination, this thing is growing on me. Now, I wouldn't buy it because I have a full motorcycle license. I would basically just get the 125cc variant. But it truly is a beginner rider learning machine. It teaches you everything about motorcycling. I've used everything I know about motorcycles just to get this thing to my destination. It's not that difficult. It is difficult for a beginner, but you can't lower the learning curve. You have to learn to use the clutch. You have to learn to use the gear shifter. You have to get used to the brakes. You have to learn these things. But the fact that this thing is so light, about 90 kilograms, 100 kilograms, and it's so low to the ground, and it's so small, and it's so unintimidating, it makes you want to learn. It makes you want to get out there and learn and practice as often as you possibly can. And if you have a kid at home that's into motorcycles and wants to get his license when he can at 16 or 18 years old, depending on your country and depending on your legislation, there's surely on the market something similar to this wherever you live. So it ain't a bad idea to start him off on something like this. Even before he's allowed to drive it on a public road, buy him one and take it, I don't know, to the countryside and let him ride for hours and hours and hours. Let him ride this thing. It's a peach to ride. And with that being said, I'm gonna end it here because we only have about 2 or 3 kilometers until I reach my destination, and I'm not gonna show you my client's house. Of course, I'm not gonna show the client's house, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Until next time, take care out there everyone, and ride safe. Bye.